This is Rosen Institute's Your Law Firm, where Lee Rosen and Ned Days cover management, marketing, finance, and new technologies for building the practice you deserve. Rosen Institute members received this episode early, as well as exclusive segments on proper management of your trust account, an answer to a member question about building an email list for marketing, as well as sessions from our pay-per-click advertising program. Get access to everything you're missing at roseninstitute.com/join. Here's Lee Rosen.
It's good to be with you today from Edinburgh, Scotland. Edinburgh feels a lot like home to us, and we've now got a few places that give us that feeling of home. Bangkok, of course, because our kids are usually there. Istanbul, because we visited quite a few times and because we often transit through that airport. Dubai, to the extent that such a sanitized city can feel like home to anyone. And then Edinburgh, we really like it here, and I suspect that part of the feeling that we get here in this city comes from familiarity, not from having been in Edinburgh so much, but because North Carolina, our former home, was deeply rooted in Scottish migration in the 18th century. Little things here in Edinburgh remind us a lot of being in North Carolina, of being at home. It's a good feeling.
It's time for your tech tip. You know that I am a sensitive soul. I'm a little bit delicate, and as a result, I develop complexes or neuroses or weird mental tics around the most seemingly mundane objects like vertical blinds or grill tongs or the commemorative plates that my grandmother loved to collect. And another such device that's somewhat emotionally charged for me is the humble calculator. This probably started in my childhood when I would watch my mother spend what seemed like hours balancing the checkbook with a little plastic calculator that had fake gemstones for the buttons. As a math-phobic little tot, I watched quietly in terror, thinking of the day when I would have to take on this horrible adult responsibility, tapping at emeralds and rubies and staring at numbers that made about as much sense to me as coordinates for space shuttle launches. Thankfully, online banking portals and the ability to finance my burrito purchases with Sezzle and Afterpay killed the need for this ritual, but truth be told, even in the old days, I never balanced a checkbook. I invented a personal finance tactic I like to call vibe spending, where I just roll the dice and assume there's enough money in the account for whatever stupid thing I'm buying. Math in general continued to haunt me throughout my life. The TI-83 and I were mortal enemies in high school, and even into adulthood and my working life at the law firm, the calculator continued to give me grief. We ran a tight ship, we had a manifest for the supplies that belonged in every meeting room, including pens, tissues, notepads, and of course a calculator. Now, one attorney in particular kept, let's say, borrowing calculators from the rooms and not returning them. I suggested she could just use the calculator app on her computer or her phone while she was at her desk. She told me where to stuff said computer and phone, at which point I felt that instead of just buying her a calculator, I was going to make a point of seeing to it that her shenanigans didn't continue, and somehow two grown adults ended up in a shouting match over a calculator. Now, hopefully for you, a calculator carries less baggage. It's just a tool and a fairly boring one, but I know that I am tallying and multiplying and dividing all kinds of things for one reason or another all day long. And believe it or not, there are actually some interesting and useful tools that make the simple calculations we are doing more convenient. So at the risk of triggering some repressed memories, let's look at a few. The quickest and dirtiest solutions, and frankly the ones I probably use most often, may not be what you would expect. You can type something like 3 plus 3 into a Google search, and Google will helpfully pop a fully functional calculator app onto the results page with the answer. It does all the basics you'd expect, as well as allowing you to solve for formulas with variables and exponents and other mathy doodads that I'd rather drink bleach than understand. For these kind of simple operations, though, I most often find myself using the built-in Spotlight feature of macOS. If you are on a Mac, you've probably used this to find a file or launch an app, but you can also type in basic math operations, and it will not only show you the result in real time as you make adjustments, but give you a button to quickly copy the result. Now, for nearly as long as macOS and Windows have existed, they have included calculator apps that did little more than addition, subtraction, multiplication, and division. But if for some reason you decide that you need to start designing airplane fuselages or running regressions to predict the price of your favorite meme coin cryptocurrency, in the past few years, the default calculator apps on both Mac and Windows have added a lot of features. They both now act as scientific calculators, programmer calculators. They have built-in currency and unit conversion, and even graphing calculator functionality, which is built into the Windows Calculator app. On Mac, it's a separate app called Grapher. Let's be honest, though, if you are regularly in need of a graphing calculator, you are probably doing something more complicated than deciding which spouse gets the jet ski, fighting a speeding ticket, or trying to convince your client he should hold off on purchasing that new car until the workers' comp check has actually cleared. That said, a lot of our daily needs are more complex than just adding together 2 or 3 numbers. Sometimes the ability to give variables or values names, refer to them later, or having a running tally of numbers that we've entered is going to be more helpful. It's the kind of thing you can do with a spreadsheet, but that's often overkill and requires a lot more setup than we are willing to do in the moment. There's an app called Solver available at solver.app that has been around for quite a while and does a good job at bridging this gap. There's also a newer entry I've been trying for a while called Numi, available at numi.app, and they are both kind of a note-taker, calculator, natural language scratchpad. They essentially try to extract a number or value from the text on each line of your document and display it on the right-hand side. So if you type in something like 8 plus 4, 12 will show up on the right. If you type 5 inches in centimeters, the equivalent conversion of 12.7 will show up on the right. You get keywords like sum so that you can type a bunch of numbers on each line and then type SUM on the line below it and the total will appear on the right. You can create labels by typing something like interest equals 0.07, principal equals 500, then interest star principal on the next line and have the results show up to the right. You really have to try it to get a feel for it, but especially if you are trying to get a rough estimate or juggle a few different values and play around with results, they are very handy tools. The fact that you can more or less use natural language, have it convert units and more makes it my go-to solution when a spreadsheet is just too much trouble. Numi works on Mac, Windows, and Linux. There's a free version that lets you have up to 2 sheets going at once. The paid version is $30, includes unlimited sheets and online syncing, but honestly, I've just used the free version as a handy scratch pad. Solver is macOS and iOS only. It has a 30-day free trial and is $35 if you decide to keep it. Solver also has a useful beta feature where you can package up a worksheet and share it as an independent app with other Macs, so other people can use your calculations and worksheets. Both of these tools are great, but truth be told, the latest update to Apple's Notes app has copied a lot of the same functionality. Labeling values, unit conversions, and more. I find Numi to be a little more reliable in terms of understanding what I want, and Apple Notes doesn't do things like totaling up a running list of numbers, but if you haven't played around with the Math Notes functionality yet, it's worth exploring. But I hear you. You are demanding more AI. I want AI in every app I use, preferably with bejeweled buttons. I can't help you with the gemstones just yet, but if you want to live on the bleeding edge, Hisab.io, that's HISSAB.io, is a web-based tool, so it works on anything with a web browser that does everything we've discussed with the calculator scratchpad apps in its free tier, but also includes options starting at $10 a month that include inline AI commands. So you can ask it to figure out things using real-time information like stock prices, flight times, and complex calculations in plain text for just about anything you want. I'm Ned Days, and that's your tech tip.
And now for your moment of concise advice. There's this gnawing feeling that you keep pushing aside. You know the feeling. It shows up late at night or when you're skimming the bank balance, a little anxiety spike. You think, that doesn't look just right. But then you move on. You've got hearings and calls and fires to put out, and you can't deal with this now, even if it doesn't feel quite right. You tell yourself that your office manager or your bookkeeper or your assistant, they've got it under control. They've got it handled. She said it's fine. She's got it. You want to believe her, so you do. Except you don't. Deep down, you know that something is off. Invoices aren't going out like they used to, or cash is getting tight, or there are weird gaps in the numbers, and she's giving you answers that sound a little too polished, a little too quick. But digging into the accounting system, that just feels overwhelming. It's not something you want to do. You don't exactly know where to start. You don't want to accuse anyone of anything. You don't have time to figure it out, and so you look away. Meanwhile, the money, it's bleeding out. The firm, it's slipping, and you're still very, very busy. You're running full speed, but you're running toward the edge of the cliff. This is how the wheels come off, not in a dramatic explosion, but in slow, quiet neglect. And maybe in your case, maybe it's not the accounting that has you worried. Maybe that part's under control, but you have this sense that something else is unraveling. Maybe it's an associate who isn't calling clients back. You're hearing more and more complaints, and there's this murmuring from your staff. Nobody says it outright, but you can feel it. Resentment is building toward that associate like pressure in a pipe. And still, you wait. You don't do anything. You don't intervene because replacing the associate would be a mess. Interviews, training, onboarding. You don't have time for that either. I could go on with the different things that many of us feel in the backs of our minds, those things that are floating around back there that worry us. The marketing's not getting done, the deadlines are slipping, the bad hires are being tolerated. We almost always know what's going off the rails. We just don't want to know what's going off the rails because knowing means you have to do something. It means confrontation. It means change. It means work. But if you are the owner of the law firm, you don't get to hide, not from this. You don't get to hope it works itself out. You have to run toward the problem. You have to say out loud, I need to see the numbers, or I need to know what's happening with those clients, or this isn't working anymore. That's the job. That's your job, not just reacting to what's on fire, but looking hard for the smoke. The heroes of 9/11, they ran toward the disaster. We're not that kind of hero, obviously, but we can be the heroes of our little universes. You start with one uncomfortable thing this week, one conversation, one report, one step toward the thing that you've been avoiding. You run toward it. That's your moment of concise advice. Wrapping up from Edinburgh, thanks for spending a few minutes with me and Ned today. We hope you have a great weekend and an even better week next week. Keep plugging away, moving forward, and getting things done. You're on the right track. You'll get there, I promise. We're all in this together, and together we build better practices through better marketing, better management, and better technology. Until next time, I'm Lee Rosen.
Thanks for listening to Your Law Firm. Subscribe to the Friday File at roseninstitute.com and join thousands of lawyers focused on working on instead of in their practices. You'll find safe, successful, actionable approaches for transforming your firm. Sign up for free at roseninstitute.com.